Hey, what is up, everybody? Jeremy here. And guys, I am very excited for the conversation that we have today, because the guest we have today is somebody that I've had the chance to know for quite a while, and she has done some very cool things. I've been lucky enough to speak on her virtual stage as well, and she's adding so much value to the world. She has a great podcast called Work From Your Happy Place. Her name is Belinda Ellsworth. Belinda, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Oh gosh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
You know, it feels like we should have done this a long time ago, so I'm glad we're finally sitting down and doing this.
I agree. I agree. It's been a real pleasure being able to work with you and over the years, and it's been fun.
So for people that don't really know you or aren't familiar with your brand, tell us a little about who you are, what you do, and kind of, what your niche in the world looks like.
Sure. So I have been a sales trainer for, the last 30 years. So that is my primary thing. So I do motivational speaking, sales training in predominantly the area of sales, goal setting, time management, all kind of like the hard skills around business. And we teach some soft skills too, as far as personal development, but really kind of the nuts and bolts of achieving success. And especially if people have a particular product that they sell or they're selling themselves, whatever the case may be. And then 6 years ago, I started the podcast because I wanted to reach a broader audience, and I wanted to really start celebrating other entrepreneurs that are working from their happy place and help others to learn what that means, to love what you do and to do it with intention. We also feature artists on our show. That was like a big aha moment that I had. We can talk about that in a minute if you like. But so we added artists to our show, and that's been a great addition because artists and business entrepreneurs think differently and have a different set of skill sets. So it's been interesting for them to be able to learn from one another.
So because I have to touch on that now before we go where I actually wanted to go, but I have this idea of like, I love talking to artists myself, whether it be musicians, whether it be like different types of people, because I find that artists are really good at kind of like seeing and putting there like what a lot of us can't see and focus, right? They create a future we can't see. I'm curious like what you've discovered about artists versus business people and what that's been like for you.
Yeah, so one day I was just doing the podcast, and I happened to have, I would get the occasional artist that would pop in on our show.
Sure.
And I happened to have two back to back in one day. And it was that I think clicked the epiphany in me, is they are really good at sort of that, right brain. They're creative. They build their fan base really well. They don't call it necessarily building a list, but in reality, that's what they're doing. But they're really good at engaging those fans and keeping those fans and creating a larger following. I mean, because they do it in a way that connects and people like them. They have a harder time with how do I manage the finances? How do I set goals that are going to be, move the business forward? How do I look at it as a business? And a lot of them have a hard time compartmentalizing that. Here's my creative side versus that, left side of the brain, which is more analytics, more those hard skills. And then you've got your business entrepreneurs who are pretty darn good at that. And yet they have a really hard time sometimes engaging, doing good customer follow-up, actually connecting with their customers, calling them up on the phone and saying, hey, what do you like better, this or that? And so it's kind of bringing the two sides of the brain together, and each can learn from one another. But that is what I have found, is they are really good at developing relationships.
Well, I think that really dovetails into kind of where I wanted to start for us. And that's the idea of working from your happy place. I'd love to see, like, how do you define that? Like, what does that mean to you? Because I think for a lot of people, at least in my viewpoint, business can feel like a slog. It can feel like a lot of work. It can feel like, you're not truly being you. And I'd love to hear from your perspective what working from your happy place means.
Sure. When I first started this, it was just really, for me, I said, what does that mean to me? And what do I want to call the show? And it was, work from your happy place meant that you really love what you do. If you love what you do, then it doesn't really feel like work, even in the difficult times. You're excited because you're doing what you love. As it's gone on, and I'm able to like hear from other people on what it means to them, and I realize, yeah, it means that to me too. And The second big one, of course, is there's a level of freedom. If you
Hmm.
are really loving what you do and you're creating your own space, you can have a good work-life balance. You can work for 14 hours a day if you want to, and on the next day you can take that time off. I mean, it doesn't mean that I don't work. I
Yeah.
have days like Tuesdays where it is a 14-hour day.
That
There's
sounds
not
like
a lot
my
of
Tuesdays, actually.
yeah. And it's okay because I wake up going, okay, let's power up. We're going to be going till like 11 o'clock tonight. Um, and that's okay because on Wednesday I take the day off. I take at least half the day. I just kind of relax and
Hmm.
know that it's going to be that way. So there's freedom in that when you have your own business in that way. And then the third thing for me, and it's probably the most important, is for me when I'm really happy probably the most is when I know I'm bringing value to others. I am making a
Mm.
contribution to somebody else's life. I'm maybe making this journey a little bit easier for them. I'm inspiring them in a way that maybe they were feeling like they couldn't do it, and today they feel like they can. I love giving people the actual skill sets so that they can actually go put them into action and actually see results in their
Hmm.
business. So that's when I'm feeling probably the happiest. It's what keeps me going through the tougher times. I guess
Yeah.
that's it. Like I love what I do. I have freedom, but I love bringing value to others, and that's what keeps you going through the really hard times that are sometimes challenging. Business is challenging.
Yeah. So how do you balance that then? Because I think there's I think personal development books are good and bad for this reason, because I think there's some people that'll look at a personal development book and they're like, the reason I'm not there is I just haven't read enough personal development books yet. Like, I just got to read more of them. I got to consume more information. But like, the balance of it is there's a lot of work involved, Belinda, too. And like, you're not going to be happy with everything, but in order to be happy, you have to do it. So I guess from your perspective, like,
Mhm.
how do we balance that?
Well, you have to take action. Everybody is waiting, and there's two things. They wait for everything to be perfect, and then they don't just get moving. And you get moving and create sort of this momentum by taking action and taking, even if it's small steps, and then seeing results, and then going, oh, I can self correct in that, or I can do this a little bit different or a little bit better. But you don't know how to self correct if you don't ever act. And
Mm,
so then people keep saying, oh, I've got to do this. I got to read a little bit more. I got to take another class instead of just like I got to dive in and I got to like take an action step.
yeah.
So that is definitely one. But the other thing is, and I'm seeing this now really post COVID, but like people have an all or nothing mentality, and they need to get rid of that all or nothing mentality. It's either like, I'm all in 100% and everything has to be perfect, or I can't do it at all. Or if I can't do this just like this, then what's the point of doing it, period?
Mm,
If you can't work out an hour every day, you will still get benefits from working out 15 minutes in a day. I
yes.
mean, so it people need to sort of abandon this all or nothing mentality. And what I mean by post COVID is there's a lot of people that were super successful prior to COVID,
Hmm.
and they probably were doing the hustle grind, maybe a little too hard. They weren't having that sort of, balance maybe. And
Hmm.
then all of a sudden they weren't hustling at all, like, right? Everything kind
Right.
of came to a stop. And now in talking and coaching to people, they're like, I just can't seem to get myself going again. I can't
Wow.
seem to really get moving. And I said, well, you just have to do this. They're afraid to go back to the hustle. I'm like, it's not a all or nothing. It's not like I have to go back to that. Find a version of what looks good for you now, today. But people are struggling with that.
So let me ask you this then, because I think the biggest thing you really hit there is the idea of action, and I think it's interesting because just to go back on what I said previously, like I think the personal development industry has become a little bit of a junkie industry almost. Like you need more, you need your next fix, you need your next book or whatever it may be, and like those things are good and they're helpful, but they're not the only thing. And I guess when you're looking at action, Belinda, like how do you plan that? Like what does it look like when you're putting together action steps? Because I think that is one of the biggest things that stops people is this thing seems unconfrontable, right? Like it's this big thing I have to do or I have to get past. But when you approach something, like how do you approach putting together action steps?
Okay. Oh, there's a couple different ways. So I teach this sort of three parts of a goal, and
Sure.
I do, and I believe in this very, very strongly. Like, because I have really done deep dives on goal setting, and I continue to because Why do people set goals? Or why don't even people set goals to begin with? And then when they do, why did they not achieve them? Or
Hmm.
what's really happening in that? And there is really a three-pronged process, and that is you've got to have the why of it first. Why do you want it? And so if people just set a goal because somebody else has done it, or because it looks
Hmm.
good, or it sounds good, or they read it in a book, or whatever, it's like they've got to have a purpose. They got to be connected to it, because that keeps driving them. The second is it's benchmarks, and people need to understand that a goal is not the end all be all. It doesn't have power over you. It doesn't own you. It's a benchmark that moves you forward.
Hmm.
And so as long as you are saying, okay, this is where I want to be, and you set that goal, then you can break your goal down, right? If you don't
Can
have
we
a
can
goal,
we talk about benchmarks a little bit? Because I will tell you personally, and my wife will reiterate this, I'm terrible with benchmarks. Like, I set them, I reach them, they help me get there. But here's the problem. Because it's not the goal, I am so mean to myself. Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, I don't celebrate the wins on the way. And I guess I'm curious, like, how do you treat benchmarks?
well, first of all, it's just understanding it's a benchmark.
Hmm.
And like people don't like Jeremy, when I first started training, which
Sure.
like say 30 years ago, and if I was in an audience and asked people to raise their hand, there'd be 25% of the room would raise their hand that they had a goal written down.
Hmm.
Well, then it just kept decreasing to 20 and 15. And now they say statistically, and I see this by show of hands, it's about 8% of people are setting goals.
Mm.
So then you get a deep
Wow.
dive and you go, like, that's awful, right? Because
That's
you don't set
terrible.
a goal or you just stay in the same place. So it's like, so then I did a deep dive on why. So it's interesting. Two key reasons why. One, people are like, well, this is a side hustle for me. So when people
Hmm.
think it's a side hustle, they don't think they have to set goals. Okay.
Right.
But the big one is, well, I don't want anyone having any expectations of me. It's this whole fear of failure. If I say it and then it doesn't come to pass, then I have failed. And they don't want to feel that way. This goes back to that whole personal development thing. Like, I don't want to feel bad. So, I tell people it's just like a GPS. You get in, you set it, off you go. It's a smart, sophisticated piece of equipment. You make a wrong turn, which we all do, right?
Hmm.
And it tells you to recalculate. It tells you to redirect. It doesn't say you're a loser, go home. Like,
Well, no,
just
I
give it
find the
up.
problem for me is like I'm overly driven. Do you get what
Uh-huh.
I'm saying? So like I set these like enormous goals, and I have these like, and I usually reach them, but the waymarks along the way, I kind of torture myself until I get to that big goal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's a benchmark is sort of that goal. But then
Yeah.
the daily actions is probably what you're calling the benchmarks.
Okay.
Those are the things that get you there. And that's where most people, they set a goal and then they just think, oh, and sometimes they do torture themselves, or they think I just need to get there and they're in a hurry. And so
Yeah.
you really got to break it down to your plan of action. That's the third piece of setting a goal, and
Okay.
that's your daily action steps. And it's like, okay, if I want to get there, in a year from now, or if I have a monthly sales goal, I break that down to weekly. The first thing is people don't break their goals down small enough. So they're never feeling like they got there. And so you got to
Mm.
break those down, and then you got to celebrate along the way. You got to
I'm
celebrate your,
I'm bad at that. I don't celebrate enough. My wife's like, "Let's get out a bottle of champagne. Do you see what you just did?" I'm like, "No, no, but it's not that." And she's like, "Do you know what I mean?"
I do know what you mean. That's been my problem for a very long time. It
So
took
you get me.
years. I get you totally. And but here's the interesting thing. Men are generally more likely to celebrate. Like, like, oh, I got my list to do. I'm gonna go play golf. I'm gonna watch a game. I'm gonna do whatever. Women are the ones that are like, okay, let me start my next list. Let me start the
Mm.
next thing. They have a hard time like being present in that moment. And that's really what you're doing. That's what I do. It's like you got to be present and you got to enjoy your wins, because otherwise it is a grind. It is that hustle. That's where that hustle and grind comes from, is like you don't ever stop and say, wow, that was pretty awesome. A good thing to help with that. And I'm not one, I was never a big advocate for a long time till I changed my mind. And but gratitude journals really do help. They help you
Mm.
to stay present, to say, okay, what was my win today? What am I grateful for today? And that helps you on so many things. It helps you to keep a positive attitude. It helps you to celebrate your wins. It helps you to have an abundancy mindset versus a scarcity mindset. So I'm a huge advocate now of gratitude journals, but it took me a long time to get there. I kind of thought they were just woo woo.
So
Like,
I want to talk about that a little bit too, because
okay.
as I said, it's I'm a highly competitive person, so like I do, there are certain things I need to get better at, and I'd love to hear about, journaling and what that's been like for you, and I guess in terms of like in action, what does that look like for you?
So, I've always been good about setting a vision board every year. Like, so for me, that's as much as it was. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to dream big at the beginning of this year and I'm going to map it out and I'm going to put it on a board. Or am I in the, I created a planner and now I have it in the beginning of that planner so everybody can go and see it on a daily basis. Because a lot of us stick it in a drawer, put it away, it's in a notebook, whatever.
Right.
And so I was good about that, but it was along the journey. I thought, as long as I set my goals, what difference does it make? But it makes a difference in your mindset. And
Hmm.
we want to stay positive because people are attracted to positive people. It helps us when we're feeling positive. And actually, there's been so much research done on gratitude. Like, people are even healthier when they use gratitude
Hmm.
journals. Doctors are using gratitude journals in treatment protocols now. Like, a lot of doctors that treat stroke patients are like, here's a gratitude journal. Like, I want you to write your wins every day. Don't focus on your what you've lost. Focus on your win, what you've gained. And in doing that, they are saying they see a quicker recovery time than people that don't. So for me, I'm not still good at just journaling.
Hmm.
Like, I'm like, maybe because I'm fast and I don't have the patience, or maybe that's kind of part of it. I'm guessing for yourself too.
Yeah.
So just writing 5 things I'm grateful for every day, or having a few prompts. Like, we now sell a gratitude journal as well, and we added prompts to it because some people need a prompt. Like,
Hmm.
tell me about your favorite area in your home and why you love being in it. It's like, oh, I know that answer, and you can journal about it. But I'm still not a big, just like some people are like, oh, they journal out everything. I'm still probably not as great about that, but I did start with a gratitude journal and I'm being pretty consistent with that. And of course I do my dream board every year. I've been pretty faithful to that for honestly the last 40 years.
You know the thing that's interesting about that, Belinda, like the idea of like being at gratitude, like I'm a big believer in like, you get more of what you put your attention on, right?
Yep.
And I think if though it can be hard sometimes, right? Because like, and sometimes you're like, oh, I'm not grateful right now, but like there's got to be some things you're grateful, right? Like you have a house, you have these different things, like,
Yes.
so I think like at least getting your attention on that, you can get more done and be more productive and actually achieve more if you can figure out how to be more grateful.
Yes, because, and I'll use this as an example. So when the pandemic happened, I had a full speaking calendar, like for the whole year. My
Hmm.
calendar was booked out for the whole year. And I have a staff and that pays for that staff. And like that was probably 65% of our income came from that leg of the business. And when the pandemic happened, I mean, I went into major panic mode.
Hmm.
And then I knew that's not going to serve me well because when you go into major panic mode, you're just like, oh my gosh, you get anxiety, you get stressed, you get paralyzed. You're like, I know what I need to do, but I can't do. So, man, I got that gratitude journal out. And that's when I got really, really, really dedicated to it on a regular basis. And every day I just didn't focus on what I didn't have or even how we were going to pay the bills or how I was going to keep my staff. I'm like,
Right.
what's good today? What's working today? And by doing that every day, I stayed positive. That helped me to not get into like panic mode or anxiety. It helped me stay creative. It helped me come up with new solutions. Because when you're panicked, it's hard to become solution oriented
Hmm.
when all you can think of is your challenge in front of your face. It's like being, here's a boulder and I can't think of how to get past this boulder. And so, but if you cannot get into that mindset, you can find your way around it. Like,
Hmm.
okay, what can I do? Because I do have these resources. I do have this. Like for me, it was like, we are safe. We are going to be okay. And that was just really important for me to get through that very, very difficult time.
What do you think was the biggest thing you learned after getting through that? Like, personally, like, what do you think's the biggest thing that's changed in your viewpoint?
Um, the biggest thing that has changed for that, and I knew this a long time ago, and somehow I lost sight of it, Jeremy,
I think
is
life has a way of doing that sometimes, though, if you don't
yes,
manage to keep the viewpoint right.
yep. And that is don't put all of your eggs in one basket.
Hmm.
have multiple streams of income, have multiple areas of your business that work and bring in. I used to be very good about that. Like I broke it down so that it was all pretty level. I had several different streams, and somewhere along the way, I either got complacent. I'm going to call it complacency.
Hmm.
It was pretty easy. It was pretty routine. I had it down. And when that happened, that was, it wasn't 30% of my business, it was nearly 70. And
Wow.
that was foolishness
Hmm.
on my part. And so it was a wake up call. It was
Yeah.
a wake up call to get back in balance and have multiple streams of income. So when one's firing, maybe the other one isn't, or when
Hmm.
you suddenly run into a big manufacturing problem, you've got your coaching business or whatever.
Yeah.
You by having multiple streams of income, you don't always depend on one of them so much that your business can be in jeopardy.
That was one of the biggest wake up calls to us, and this is a number of years ago. Like when our team got like big enough where it was like, okay, I'm not just paying one person anymore. I'm like, I got to figure out paying 15 people every 2 weeks. Like that was, I had to look at my business and look at how we're charging, what cash flow. Like you actually have to really think differently at your business when it gets in that realm.
Yes, you really do. For us, the most employees we've probably had and carried at any one time is probably about 8.
Hmm.
When the pandemic happened, we had 6. Um, and I didn't want them to lose their jobs.
Yeah,
I wanted to keep them, and I was very happy that we were able to keep everyone.
that's amazing.
Um, it was, and everybody pulled together and everybody worked together, and we came up with new ideas, and I had to work really, really hard. But in working really, really hard, I created a new stream of income that now is a big stream of income for us that wasn't there before.
Isn't it amazing how creative you get when you kind of have to? You don't have a choice but to be creative.
Yes, yes, yes. And it's fun, right? I'm actually, as stressful as it was in the moment,
Yeah,
I afterwards, I'm like, wow, I did that. And I, here's the crazy thing. So we
yeah,
already had a planner at the time, and it was selling pretty well. We'd had it for 3 years, and it was just the planner. And so then that happened in March. I always get all the printed materials, files to the manufacturer by May 1 in order
yeah.
for us to get it on time. So, like, that's a 6-week window. And I thought, oh my gosh, we've got to build this out, which I had been saying I was going to do every year. And so in 6 weeks, I designed a gratitude journal, a leader planning guide, bookmarks, the box that it went in. Like we designed a whole package to go with that planner. It was kind of incredible. And it sold, and it sold
Amazing.
really, really well. And I worked long hours and nights. And when that was over, I was like, why didn't I ever take the time and do this before? But we got it done.
Amazing. Well, Belinda, I've really enjoyed this conversation. For people listening, you have a free guide for them. So I'd love for them to hear about this. So where can they find that, and where can they find you?
Sure. So if they go to workfromyourhappyplace.com, they will find a free gift download there. And that there's 2 there for them. There is the a video of the 5 things that contribute to overall happiness and of living a happier life. And then there is a download of the top 10 sales strategies. So for those sales junkies out there, people that are wanting to kind of get some benefits or tips on how to have better sales, there's that download as well. They can come listen to our podcast. It's pretty awesome. And we're launching a brand new subscription box called My Happy Place. It's going to be pretty cool. And we're launching that April, May, it's looking like. And
Mhm.
they can sign up for a free 6-month subscription by going to workfromyourhappyplace.com/VIP.
Very cool. Well, Belinda Ellsworth, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you, Jeremy, for having me. It was my pleasure.